Greetings Mech Warriors, I am Yuzrol, and in this video I will be taking a basic look at the Catapult battle mech. The Catapult, often just referred to as a cat, or that spamming, weighs 65 tons, classing it as a heavy mech. It's designed for long-range fire support using LRMs or heavy energy weaponry to soften up opponents for the rest of the lance, and there are 4 principal variants. The C1, which you can see here, is the classic design. However, you also have the C4, the A1 and the K2. The C4 and the C1 are variations on a theme. Both mount missile launchers and lasers, the C1 mounting 2 missile launchers and 4 lasers, the C4 swapping that around to mount 2 energy hardpoints and 4 missile hardpoints, even if by default it only uses 2 of the missile hardpoints. The A1 variant takes matters even further, losing the laser points entirely and mounting up to 3 missile hardpoints in each arm. Both variants mount jump jets as standard, and a 260 rated standard engine gives you a top speed of just under 65 kph, making for a reasonably manoeuvrable mech on the battlefield. You won't be running away with, or even keeping up with, light mechs, but you'll be able to stay ahead of the assault mechs if one decides to start chasing you, most of the time. The C-types as they stand have a problem with ammunition. As standard, both types load 2 tons of long-range missile ammo, which gives you a total of 360 missiles, but each volley from a C1 fires off 30 missiles, each volley from a C4 fires 40, so you're only going to get 12 volleys or 9 volleys respectively before you have to fall back onto lasers. The A1, by contrast, loads 4 tons of LRM ammo, but once you're through your 24 volleys, you're reduced to harsh language. A common workaround is to remove 2 or 3 of the jump jets and instead to use the space to load extra LRM ammo. So that will take you up to 24 volleys in the C-types and potentially 36 volleys in the A-type. There is no downside to this at the moment because the number of jets loaded onto a mech has no effect on jump performance, but beta is beta, that is almost certainly going to change at some point. Even if it does change, however, then if you're prepared to accept degraded jump performance, it's a good way of keeping a catapult in the fight for longer, and it's also quite a cheap modification to make. More extensive mods include an endo-steel structure, which will trade 14 crit slots for 3 tons give or take of weight saving, and an extra large engine will typically save you about 3 tons as well. Ferrofibrous armour, again, it's available, and I've actually got it loaded on my Catapult C1. I am probably going to switch this back because it takes up 14 crit slots, but only saves you a ton, give or take, of weight, making it distinctly less efficient than either the XL engine or the endo-steel structure in terms of weight saved against crits lost. Your weapon refit options are actually surprisingly extensive given the limited number of hardpoints you have. Besides tweaking the laser hardpoints and maybe fitting small or medium pulse lasers as alternative close-range holdouts, or even loading a tag laser to help with obtaining missile lock-ons, you can also tweak around the missile hardpoints on the C4 and the A1. So, for example, on a C4, you might consider adding a pair of SRM launchers to give you some close-range bite. Indeed, one particular variant of the A1, which loads 6 streak launchers, has acquired the distinction of its own name, the Catapult, as well as the loathing and hatred of light mech pilots everywhere upon discovering that the vulnerable LRM boat they were chasing down was in fact nothing of the kind. Finally, we have the K variant of the Catapult, which I haven't discussed so far because it's a completely different beast. The K-series dumps the missile launchers entirely, replacing them with a pair of energy weapons, usually two very large energy weapons. Stock armament consists of a pair of PPCs as the primary weapons, with two medium lasers and two machine guns as backup. A downside to all this, however, is that because you have to fit extra heat sinks to effectively deal with the build from the PPCs, you've got no room on the chassis for jump jets, so you do trade off some mobility. What you do have, however, are a pair of ballistic hardpoints, and it was probably inevitable that somebody was going to try to shove the biggest guns available into those. Some advice, ladies and gentlemen. If you ever see a K2 aggressively trying to close the range with you, don't let it happen. There is a very, very good chance that you are facing a Catapult, and if it gets within 270 meters of you, you will be saying hi to a pair of autocannon 20s. Slightly more common is the Gauss-Pult, which fits a pair of Gauss rifles into the torsos, and at the moment has a solid claim on being one of the best sniper mechs in the game, but frankly that's a whole other video. And in case you were wondering, which somehow I doubt, the K designation for this variant derives from House Kurita, who were the first house to field this particular version of the Catapult. I can only assume that being half a mile behind the fighting and lobbing in long-range missiles, no matter how effective it might have been, was considered lacking in honour. On the battlefield, the Catapult is very much a team player's mech. Granted, this is true for every mech in the game, but the Catapult's role as artillery means it's at its best when working with other mechs. The first piece of advice I have is therefore this: find a team, and not a gaggle of schmucks who happen to have the keys to a battle mech. Get yourself onto the Comstar TeamSpeak servers, they're listed on the MWO forums, and find yourself some friends, even if they're only temporary ones. Contrary to reputation, those guys don't actually bite. Usually. Key to getting the best out of the traditional Cat build is also knowing the limits of the LRM system. Firstly, it has a minimum range. Since storing armed impact-fused missiles inside a mech is stupid, even by Mechwarrior standards, LRMs do not arm until they have travelled about 180 meters. Unfortunately, this means that firing LRMs at a close-range target is a waste of ammunition, which is the first of several good reasons to keep your distance. The second limit is that, while they can be dumb-fired, LRMs require a lock-on to stand any chance of actually hitting something. Getting lock-on is simple. Target an enemy mech, hold the sights over them until the missile circle goes red, and pull the trigger. The catch is getting the sensor track in the first place. To do that, 4 conditions have to be satisfied. 1. The enemy mech is powered up. 2. The enemy mech is within about 800 meters of the spotting mech. 3. The spotting mech can draw line of sight to the enemy mech. And 4. The spotting mech is more or less looking at the enemy mech. About 45 degrees either side of the spotting mech's point of aim is fine, which is why there's that 90-degree cone marked on the minimap. Incidentally, not satisfying this condition is why I get a face full of Atlas apparently from nowhere in the course of this video. Provided all 4 of those are satisfied simultaneously, the enemy mech is tracked on sensors and the information relayed to all friendlies on the map. Hence, I can target and lock onto a Raven, even though, relative to me, the Raven was behind a hill to start with. This is why you want to make friends with your team's light mechs. They will often be the ones acting as spotters for your missiles. Should sensor track, and thus lock, be lost while LRMs are in flight, the missiles will head to the target's last known position, and thus probably miss. Missiles will attempt to correct if a target is reacquired quickly, but it's usually too late. Keeping sensor track is vital to scoring LRM hits, and a light mech pilot who can do that while evading fire at 140 km/h is phenomenally important to a lance. Third limit. While a locked LRM will probably hit the mech you aimed it at, what location on the mech gets hit is a matter of chance. You can use LRMs to crack a target's armour, soften it up and leave it reeling, but to deliver an efficient kill shot, remember engine, cockpit or both legs, you need direct fire weaponry. Again, this comes back to team play. If the light mechs set the enemy up for you, your job is to set them up for the brawlers on your team, the Atlases, the Hunchbacks, etc. Fourth limit on the LRMs is terrain. LRMs have a vexing habit of hitting intervening terrain. Hills, buildings, bridges the target took shelter under, etc. Targets in close terrain are not particularly easy to hit with LRMs, even if you can hold solid sensor locks on them, and significant amounts of ammunition can be wasted rearranging the geography rather than the enemy. Finally, the Cat has a design peculiarity that has to be noted. The launchers are fitted with doors that will close if missiles aren't fired for a few seconds. This does reduce the chance of a critical hit to the launchers, but the doors then have to be opened again to fire, which takes about a second. If sensor tracks are shaky, particularly at the start of a fight, it's entirely possible to commit to a launch on a locked target and then lose the lock before the warheads even launch. There's nothing to be done about it, but bear it in mind. It's yet another reason why targets in close terrain aren't good for an LRM-armed catapult. So, to summarise: 1. Join a team, not a cluster of targets. 2. Be sure of your sensor tracks before you fire. 3. Keep your distance. And 4. Weaken the enemy, then let the brawlers finish them off unless there's no other choice and you have to use your own lasers. And that's pretty much it, as far as the basics are concerned. I have been Yusril, and if I don't see you on the battlefield first, I'll hopefully see you here again soon. Farewell.